The calendar on my fridge mocked me with its bright, sunny beach scene. Only 3 more sleeps until paradise. I could almost feel the warm sand between my toes and taste the salty air. This wasn't just any vacation. It was a trip to the Outer Banks with my best friends. A week of sun, surfing, and 0 responsibilities. We'd been planning this getaway for months, poring over pictures of beach houses with wraparound porches and dreaming of dolphin sightings. I'd even bought a brand new surfboard, a shiny blue beauty I couldn't wait to christen in the Atlantic waves. My suitcase was practically bursting with swimsuits, sunscreen, and the latest beach red I'd made a huge to-do list for before I left. I packed, paid all my bills, and made sure my apartment was spotless. But the most important thing was making sure my grandpa was okay. Grandpa Joe lived in a quiet little house a few towns over, the same house he and Grandma had built together years ago. He was as independent as could be, still mowing his own lawn and tending to his prize-winning roses. I visited him every week, but I always felt a pang of guilt leaving him alone, especially for a whole week. "Now, don't you worry about me," he chuckled when I told him about the trip. "You go have fun. I'll be just fine." I trusted him, I really did, but a tiny seed of worry still lingered. I'd left him with a fridge full of his favorite foods, promised to call every day, and even showed him how to video call on his tablet, though he mostly just pointed it at the ceiling. Still, as I drifted off to sleep that night, visions of perfect waves were mixed with fleeting images of Grandpa, alone in his quiet house. Grandpa Joe wasn't your typical grandpa. He didn't spend his days napping in a rocking chair or watching daytime television. He was always busy, always tinkering, always doing. His hands, weathered and strong, were a testament to a life spent building and creating. He could fix anything from a leaky faucet to a sputtering lawnmower. His pride and joy was his garden. Rows of vibrant roses lined the walkway, each one carefully pruned and nurtured. Tomatoes plump and red climb trellises he'd built himself. He even had a small patch of corn, just like the ones he used to grow on the farm when he was a kid. He'd always say, "A man needs to keep his hands in the dirt. Keeps him grounded." Every spring, he'd enter his roses in the local garden competition, and every year, he'd come home with a blue ribbon. He wasn't one to brag, but you could see the twinkle in his eye when he talked about his girls, as he affectionately called them. He was stubborn, too. Once, he'd fallen off a ladder while cleaning the gutters, but refused to go to the hospital. "Just a little scratch," he'd insisted, patching himself up with a bandage and a healthy dose of grumbling. That's just how he was. He still drove his old pickup truck, a beat-up Ford that was older than me. He refused to get a new one, claiming it was perfectly good, and they don't make 'em like they used to. It was a familiar sight around town. Grandpa Joe behind the wheel, a baseball cap perched on his head, a wave for everyone he passed. He was a fixture in the community, a man respected for his hard work, his kindness, and his unwavering independence. It was hard to imagine anything shaking that. Of course, nothing is ever perfect, and Grandpa Joe's little slice of paradise came with one major annoyance. The Homeowners Association, or HOA. They were, to put it mildly, a pain. A group of busybodies obsessed with perfectly manicured lawns and matching mailbox colors. They seemed to thrive on finding fault with everyone's property. Their president, Mrs. Kravitz, was particularly notorious. A woman with a permanent frown and a measuring tape always at the ready, she was the self-appointed guardian of neighborhood aesthetics. She'd send out weekly emails filled with petty complaints. A garbage can left out too long. A slightly crooked Christmas light. A rogue dandelion daring to sprout in the perfectly green grass. Grandpa Joe had his fair share of run-ins with the HOA. They once sent him a notice because his roses were too fragrant. Yes, really. Another time, they complained that his lawn was half an inch too long, despite the fact that it was perfectly healthy and green. He usually ignored their ridiculous demands, figuring they had nothing better to do than nitpick. But the HOA had a history of escalating things. They'd threatened fines, sent strongly worded letters, and even, in one extreme case, tried to force a neighbor to repaint his house because the shade of blue wasn't harmonious with the rest of the street. They were relentless, and they seemed to have a particular fondness for picking on the elderly residents. They saw them as easy targets. That was a big mistake when it came to Grandpa Joe. They really didn't know who they were dealing with. The second day of the vacation was pure bliss. The sun was shining, the waves were perfect, and I was finally starting to unwind. I was just about to catch another wave when my phone buzzed in my waterproof pouch. I glanced at the caller ID, Mrs. Peterson, Grandpa Joe's next-door neighbor. Mrs. Peterson was a sweet, elderly woman who always kept an eye out for Grandpa. I figured she was just calling to say hello. Maybe to tell me that Grandpa Joe's roses were looking particularly lovely. I paddled back to shore, dried my hands, and answered the call. "Hello, Mrs. Peterson. How are you?" I asked, trying to keep the excitement of the waves out of my voice. Her voice was shaky and lower than usual. "Oh, honey, I hate to bother you on your vacation, but I'm a little worried about your Grandpa Joe." My stomach dropped. "What's wrong? Is he okay?" "Well, he seems fine physically, but the HOA, they've been giving him a hard time. Mrs. Kravitz was over there this morning shouting about something. I couldn't hear exactly what, but it didn't sound good. Something about violations and eviction." "Eviction?" My heart pounded in my chest. "Eviction? What are you talking about? What kind of violations?" "I don't know all the details, dear, but it seems like they're really going after him. I just thought you should know. He seems so upset, but he's trying to act like everything's fine." The image of Grandpa Joe, trying to hide his worry behind a brave face, flashed through my mind. My perfect vacation suddenly felt very far away. The waves didn't seem so inviting anymore. The sun felt a little less warm. Something was terribly wrong, and I needed to find out what. I thanked Mrs. Peterson and promised to call Grandpa Joe right away. My hands were shaking as I dialed his number. It rang, and finally he answered, his voice sounding tired. "Hey, Grandpa, it's me." "Mrs. Peterson said the HOA was giving you some trouble?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. There was a long pause. "Oh, it's nothing, dear. Just some silly misunderstanding." "Grandpa, please tell me what's going on." Mrs. Peterson mentioned eviction. "Are they really trying to evict you?" He sighed. "Well, they sent me a notice. Said I was in violation of several HOA rules." "Like what?" I pressed. "Oh, you know, the usual nonsense. They said my mailbox is the wrong shade of blue. Apparently, it's supposed to be coastal blue, and mine is sky blue. And they said my petunias are the wrong color. They have to be sunset pink, not coral pink." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "That's it? They're trying to evict you over a mailbox color and petunias?" "Well," he hesitated. "They also said my lawn is a bit overgrown, but it's just a few weeds, and the roses are doing so well. I haven't had time to get to everything." My anger started to boil. A few weeds and slightly off-color flowers? This was ridiculous. The HOA was trying to kick my grandpa out of his home, the home he and Grandma had built together, over something so utterly trivial. It was outrageous. I could feel the heat rising in my face. This wasn't just nitpicking anymore. This was a declaration of war. Being hundreds of miles away, stuck on a beach while Grandpa Joe was facing eviction, made me feel utterly helpless. I paced back and forth on the sand, phone glued to my ear as I tried to figure out what to do. I called the HOA, but they refused to discuss the matter with me, claiming I wasn't a homeowner in the community. Mrs. Kravitz's voice dripped with condescension. I tried to reason with Grandpa Joe, urging him to fight back, to hire a lawyer. But he was hesitant. "It's just not worth the trouble, dear," he said wearily. "I'm too old for all this fighting." His resignation only fueled my frustration. I knew he was just trying to protect me, not wanting me to worry. But I was worried. I was furious. I imagined Mrs. Kravitz, with her measuring tape and her smug grin, bullying my sweet, kind grandpa. I felt a surge of anger towards the HOA, towards their petty rules and their heartless tactics. But I also felt a pang of guilt. I should have been there looking after Grandpa. I should have anticipated this. I should have done something to protect him from these bullies. Sleep was impossible that night. I tossed and turned, replaying the conversation with Grandpa Joe, picturing his worried face. The sound of the waves, which had been so soothing just hours before, now seemed to mock me. I felt trapped, useless, and desperate to find a way to help my grandpa. I knew I couldn't just sit on the beach and do nothing. I had to act, and I had to act fast. As I lay there, staring at the ceiling, the ocean's roar fading into a dull hum, a thought sparked in my mind. A resource I hadn't considered. A way to help even from afar. My job, well, let's just say it involves working closely with the local authorities. I've built some solid relationships over the years, people I trust, people who understand right from wrong, people who wouldn't stand for bullies picking on an elderly man. I thought of Officer Miller, a kind, level-headed guy I'd worked with on several community outreach programs. He was always fair, always willing to listen, and always ready to help those in need. I knew he wouldn't hesitate to look into the situation with Grandpa Joe and the HOA. It wasn't about using my position to get special treatment. It was about ensuring that Grandpa Joe was being treated fairly, that the HOA wasn't overstepping their bounds. It was about making sure they weren't taking advantage of an elderly man who just wanted to live peacefully in his own home. A glimmer of hope flickered within me. I still felt a long way away, but at least I had a plan. I could reach out to Officer Miller, explain the situation, and ask him to check on Grandpa Joe. It was a start. It was something. And it was a whole lot better than sitting on the beach, feeling helpless. The wheels started turning. It was time to put my connections to good use. It was time to fight back. The next morning, I woke up with a renewed sense of purpose. I waited until a reasonable hour, then dialed Officer Miller's direct line. He answered on the second ring. "Hey," narrator's name, "good to hear from you." "What's up?" he said, his voice friendly and professional. I explained the situation with Grandpa Joe and the HOA, carefully omitting any details about my specific role that might compromise my position. I emphasized Grandpa Joe's age, his independence, and the seemingly trivial nature of the violations. I also mentioned Mrs. Peterson's concerns about the HOA's behavior. "It just seems like they're really going after him, Officer Miller," I said, my voice laced with concern. "I'm worried they might be taking advantage of him." Officer Miller listened patiently, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When I finished, he said, "I understand your concerns." Narrator's name. "I know Grandpa Joe, he's a good man. I'll swing by his place later today, check on him and have a chat with the HOA. I can't promise anything, but I'll make sure everything is on the up and up." Relief washed over me. "Thank you so much, Officer Miller. I really appreciate it." "No problem." Narrator's name. "That's what we're here for. Just give me Grandpa Joe's address and I'll take care of it." I provided the address, thanked him again, and hung up the phone, feeling a little lighter. It wasn't a complete solution, but it was a start. I put the wheels in motion. Now all I could do was wait and hope that Officer Miller could help. At least Grandpa Joe wasn't alone anymore. Someone was looking out for him. Later that afternoon, my phone rang again. It was Officer Miller. "Hey." Narrator's name. "Just wanted to give you an update," he said. "I went by Grandpa Joe's place." My heart pounded. "And? How is he?" "He's doing okay, a little shaken up, but otherwise fine. He's a tough old bird," Officer Miller chuckled. "And about the HOA situation? Well, let's just say I think they might have been exaggerating a bit." "Exaggerating?" I asked, my voice rising slightly. "Yeah," Officer Miller replied. "The mailbox is blue, all right, but I wouldn't call it a major violation. The petunias are colorful and the lawn, well, I've seen worse. A lot worse. It looks like Grandpa Joe is doing a pretty good job keeping things up, especially for someone his age." He paused. I also had a chat with Mrs. Kravitz and a few other members of the HOA board. They seemed a little defensive. They claimed they were just trying to enforce the rules, but I got the feeling they were singling Grandpa Joe out. "So, you think they're being unfair?" I asked, hoping for confirmation. Let's just say I reminded them that everyone deserves to be treated with respect and that the rules should be applied fairly and consistently. I also mentioned that harassing an elderly resident could have some unintended consequences. I smiled. Thank you, Officer Miller. You're a lifesaver. Just doing my job? Narrator's name. But I think you can rest a little easier now. I don't think the HOA will be bothering Grandpa Joe anytime soon. While Officer Miller didn't share the exact details of his conversation with the HOA, I could imagine it vividly. He was a master of subtle persuasion, a firm but fair negotiator. I pictured him standing in Mrs. Kravitz's perfectly manicured living room, his uniform crisp and professional, his voice calm but authoritative. He likely started by acknowledging the HOA's role in maintaining the community's standards, emphasizing the importance of clear rules and consistent enforcement. But then, he would have gently pointed out the potential legal ramifications of their actions. He might have reminded them that targeting an elderly resident could be seen as discriminatory, opening them up to lawsuits and negative publicity. He might have also mentioned the concept of selective enforcement, explaining that if they weren't consistently enforcing every single rule against every single resident, their actions against Grandpa Joe could be considered unfair and unlawful. I imagined him emphasizing the importance of community spirit and neighborly kindness, reminding them that a little compassion can go a long way. He probably stressed that their focus should be on resolving issues amicably, not on escalating conflicts and creating unnecessary stress for their neighbors. And finally, I'm sure he politely but firmly suggested that they reconsider their eviction attempt, emphasizing that it was unlikely to succeed and would only create more problems for everyone involved. He likely left them with a clear message: treat Grandpa Joe with respect, apply the rules fairly, and focus on building a positive community, not on bullying an elderly man over a slightly blue mailbox. I knew Officer Miller's words would carry weight. He had a way of making people see reason, even Mrs. Kravitz. The next day, I received a call from Grandpa Joe himself. His voice was lighter, almost cheerful. "Well, dear," he said, "it seems the HOA has had a change of heart." I held my breath. "What do you mean?" "They sent me a letter, apologizing for the misunderstanding, and informing me that they were dropping the eviction attempt. They even said my roses are looking particularly lovely this year." He chuckled. "Can you believe it?" I exhaled, a wave of relief washing over me. "That's wonderful, Grandpa. I'm so glad." "It seems your friend, Officer Miller, paid them a visit. He's a very persuasive young man," Grandpa Joe said, a hint of amusement in his voice. "I think he reminded them that they can't just go around bullying people, especially not old folks like me." I smiled, picturing Mrs. Kravitz's face as she penned that apology. I'm sure it was the hardest thing she'd ever had to do. "So, everything's okay now?" I asked, wanting to be absolutely sure. "Yes, dear. Everything's fine. Thanks to you and Officer Miller, I can go back to tending my roses in peace." I knew the HOA probably wasn't thrilled about backing down, but they had no choice. They knew they were in the wrong, and they knew they couldn't win. They'd underestimated Grandpa Joe, and they'd definitely underestimated the people who cared about him. The eviction attempt was officially over. Grandpa Joe was safe, and I could finally breathe again. But I still felt the need to get home. This vacation was officially over. Saying goodbye to my friends was bittersweet. They understood why I had to leave, of course, but they were disappointed that our vacation was cut short. I promised to make it up to them, maybe plan another trip soon, one where we could actually relax and enjoy ourselves. Packing my suitcase felt different this time. The excitement and anticipation were replaced with a sense of urgency and a deep longing to see Grandpa Joe. I couldn't wait to hug him, to tell him how proud I was of him, and to make sure he was truly okay. The drive home was a blur. I barely noticed the scenery. My mind focused solely on Grandpa Joe. I replayed the events of the past few days, marveling at how quickly things had escalated and how fortunate we were to have Officer Miller on our side. I also thought about the HOA, about Mrs. Kravitz and her obsession with rules and regulations. I wondered if they had learned their lesson, if they would finally start treating people with kindness and respect. I hoped so, but I wasn't holding my breath. As I got closer to Grandpa Joe's town, my anxiety started to fade, replaced by a growing sense of anticipation. I imagined his smile, the twinkle in his eye, the warmth of his hug. I couldn't wait to see him, to tell him everything was going to be all right, and to finally put this whole ordeal behind us. The sooner I could see him, the better I would feel. I pressed down a little harder on the accelerator. The beach was nice, but home was where my grandpa was. As I pulled into Grandpa Joe's driveway, I saw him sitting on the porch swing, a watering can in his hand, tending to his beloved roses. He looked up as my car approached, a wide smile spreading across his face. I parked the car, jumped out, and ran towards him, engulfing him in a tight hug. "Grandpa!" I exclaimed, squeezing him tightly. "I'm so glad you're okay." He chuckled, patting my back. "I told you not to worry, dear. I'm tougher than I look." We stood there for a moment, just holding each other, the unspoken emotions flowing between us. I could feel the relief radiating from him, the gratitude for my support. We finally broke apart, and I took a good look at him. He seemed a little tired, a little older than I remembered, but his eyes still twinkled with that familiar spark. "Come on inside, dear," he said, putting his arm around my shoulder. "I made your favorite cookies, and I have a pot of tea brewing." As we walked into the house, I noticed that everything was exactly as I remembered it. Cozy, comfortable, and filled with the warmth of Grandpa Joe's love. The aroma of freshly baked cookies filled the air, a comforting reminder of simpler times. We sat at the kitchen table, sipping tea and munching on cookies, talking about everything and nothing. He told me about his roses, about Mrs. Peterson's cat, and about the squirrel that kept trying to steal his tomatoes. I told him about my vacation, about my friends, and about my plans for the future. But mostly, we just enjoyed each other's company, grateful for the bond that connected us. A bond that was stronger than any HOA rule or any petty complaint. It was good to be home. It was good to be with Grandpa Joe. And it was good to know that everything was finally all right. A few weeks later, I visited Grandpa Joe again. The roses were blooming beautifully, their vibrant colors a testament to his green thumb and unwavering dedication. But something new had appeared in his backyard. It was a small vegetable garden, neatly organized into rows of tomatoes, peppers, and cucumbers. He even had a small section dedicated to herbs, basil, oregano, and rosemary. "What's this, Grandpa?" I asked, surprised. "I didn't know you were planning on starting a vegetable garden." He smiled, a mischievous twinkle in his eye. "Well, I figured it was time to add a little variety to my yard. Besides," he added, his voice taking on a more serious tone, "I wanted to show those HOA folks that I can grow whatever I want on my property. It's my land, and I'll do with it as I please." I laughed, understanding the deeper meaning behind his words. The vegetable garden wasn't just about growing food. It was about asserting his independence, about reclaiming his space, about sending a message to the HOA that they couldn't control him. "I call it my victory garden," he said proudly. "A reminder that even when things get tough, you can always find a way to grow and thrive." I helped him water the plants, marveling at his resilience and his unwavering spirit. The victory garden was a symbol of his strength, his determination, and his refusal to be intimidated. It was a reminder that even the smallest act of defiance can make a big difference. And it was a testament to the power of one man's love for his home and his garden. Word spread quickly about the HOA's failed attempt to evict Grandpa Joe and Officer Miller's involvement. The neighbors, who had long suffered under the HOA's strict rules, were emboldened by Grandpa Joe's victory. Mrs. Peterson, especially, was thrilled. She told me that Mrs. Kravitz had stopped by her house, not to issue a complaint, but to compliment her on her flower garden. "Can you believe it?" she exclaimed. She actually smiled. The HOA meetings became less frequent and less confrontational. The weekly emails, once filled with petty complaints, were now filled with community announcements and suggestions for neighborhood improvements. They even organized a block party, something they would never have considered before. The HOA started focusing on more important issues, like improving the neighborhood park and organizing a community watch program. They still enforced the rules, but they did so with more compassion and understanding. Mrs. Kravitz, while still a stickler for rules, seemed to have mellowed out. She even stopped by Grandpa Joe's house to admire his victory garden, offering him tips on how to keep the squirrels away from his tomatoes. It was clear that the HOA had learned a valuable lesson. They realized that they couldn't just bully people into compliance, that they needed to treat their residents with respect and fairness. They also realized that they weren't above the law and that their actions could have consequences. The balance of power had shifted. The HOA was no longer a feared and dreaded entity, but a more reasonable and responsive organization. And it was all thanks to Grandpa Joe's resilience, Officer Miller's intervention, and a little bit of luck. Looking back on the whole experience, I realized how much I had learned. It wasn't just about the HOA or the Victory Garden. It was about something much bigger. It was about the importance of family, about standing up for those you love, and about using your resources to help others. I had almost let my vacation take priority over Grandpa Joe's well-being, but thankfully, I realized my mistake before it was too late. I learned that even small acts of kindness and support can make a huge difference in someone's life. Officer Miller's willingness to help, even though it was a relatively minor issue, had a profound impact on Grandpa Joe and the entire community. I also learned that it's important to fight for what's right, even when it seems difficult or inconvenient. The HOA had tried to take advantage of Grandpa Joe, but we didn't let them get away with it. We stood up for him and we won. And finally, I learned that it's important to use your unique skills and connections to make the world a better place. My job, which I had always seen as just a way to make a living, had given me the opportunity to help someone I cared about. The HOA might have called the cops on Grandpa Joe, but little did they know the cops worked for me in a way. And that, as it turned out, was a very big mistake for them. But the biggest lesson of all was that family always comes first, and that love and loyalty are the most powerful forces in the world. And that's a lesson I'll never forget.